The clatter echoed sharply across Gate 23 as Emily Harper tumbled hard onto the gleaming tile floor of JFK Airport, her boarding pass fluttering from her hand like a wounded bird. The contents of her purse scattered in a chaotic sprawl, coins rolling under benches, a photo of her late mother sliding across the walkway, and a well-worn paperback splitting open at its spine. For a long breath, the world spun, her cheek pressed coolly against the floor, her heart thudding with embarrassment. Travelers paused, glanced, and hurried on, except for one man. "Here, let me help you," a calm, warm voice broke through the distant boarding announcements and chatter. A pair of polished brown leather shoes stopped inches from her hand. She blinked up, startled, into the clear blue eyes of a tall man in his mid-50s, his salt and pepper hair slightly tousled, a worn satchel slung over his shoulder. He offered a steady hand, his smile gentle and unassuming. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see." Emily started, her cheeks flushing as she realized she had tripped over his unattended suitcase. But the man shook his head lightly. "It's all right. Happens to the best of us." Together, they gathered her scattered belongings. He even caught her mother's photograph just before it skittered under a vending machine. His movements were deliberate, thoughtful, almost as though he understood the weight each item carried. As Emily brushed herself off, wincing slightly at a scraped knee, she felt her chest tighten, not just from the fall, but from everything pressing on her spirit. She was on her way to San Francisco, returning home after burying her mother in Boston. The last few weeks had hollowed her out. Her job had crumbled, her savings dwindled, her relationship fractured beyond repair. Losing her mother, the last person who truly knew her heart, was the final blow. She had spent the flight east wondering how she'd even begin to rebuild. Now, standing in an airport terminal with aching knees and scattered memories, she felt as fragile as glass. The man studied her quietly. "Rough day." His words weren't intrusive. They landed softly, as if spoken by someone familiar with fragile hearts. Emily hesitated, unsure why her throat thickened at such a simple question. Something about his steady gaze made her want to answer honestly. Yeah, she whispered, fingers tightening around the worn photograph. "Rough month. Maybe rough year." She forced a small smile, her usual mask of composure slipping. "I'm sorry. I should let you get on your way." But the man surprised her by pulling his suitcase aside and settling onto a nearby bench. He patted the seat beside him. "I have time. Sit with me for a moment." Her instincts told her to politely decline, to retreat into her shell of self-reliance. But for the first time in weeks, her loneliness roared louder than her pride. Slowly, cautiously, Emily sat down. "I'm Jack," he offered simply. His voice had that comforting rasp, like late-night radio hosts or old country songs. "You seem like someone carrying a heavy suitcase of her own." He nodded toward her purse. That unexpected metaphor made her laugh, a soft, real laugh that surprised her as much as it did him. "Emily," she said quietly. Yeah. More like a freight truck." Jack didn't ask for details. Instead, he leaned back, as though ready to sit there for as long as she needed, no expectations. Gradually, words spilled from her lips in slow currents, about her mother's long illness, the hospital vigils, the strained phone calls with her estranged father, the crumbling of her once promising architecture career as she became her mother's sole caretaker. About returning to an empty apartment and an empty life. Jack listened. Really listened. He didn't interject platitudes or offer hasty advice. He nodded thoughtfully, sometimes murmuring, "I hear you," in a way that made her chest loosen just a little. When her voice finally cracked and tears slipped down her cheek, he wordlessly handed her a clean handkerchief. A real one, soft white cotton, not flimsy tissues. That small, old-fashioned gesture made her weep harder, but it was the kind of weeping that rinsed something clean inside. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. She didn't check her watch. Eventually, Jack spoke. "You know, my wife, Margaret, passed 5 years ago. His tone was even, but layered with something deep. Pancreatic cancer. I spent 2 years running between work and hospitals. And when she was gone, I didn't know who I was anymore. I nearly drowned in it all. Emily's eyes widened softly. I used to sit in airports, just like this, Jack continued, gazing at the windows beyond the terminal where planes drifted like steel birds. Not because I had anywhere to go, but because watching people leave and return reminded me life keeps moving. Even when we think ours has stopped. His words hung between them, quiet but thunderous in their truth. Emily swallowed hard. I eventually learned something. Jack folded his hands together. We think when we lose someone, love disappears with them. But love doesn't leave. It just changes form. It lives on in the people we show kindness to next. In the small ways we keep showing up, for ourselves, for strangers. He smiled faintly. Sometimes tripping on a stranger's suitcase is just how the universe reminds us we don't have to carry it alone forever. Emily sat very still. The truth of his words seeped into the broken cracks of her heart like warm sunlight on cold stone. Jack reached into his satchel and pulled out a slim leather journal. He flipped it open, tore a page carefully, and scribbled something on it. Handing it to her, he said gently, "This was my wife's favorite quote. Kept me going when everything felt like too much." Emily unfolded the note slowly. In neat handwriting were words by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one, you will learn to live with it. You will heal and rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. Her lips trembled as she read it twice, then again. Something uncoiled in her chest, a tether of quiet strength she'd forgotten existed. When her flight was called, she rose reluctantly. "Jack, thank you. You don't know how much I needed this today." He stood too, smile warm. "I think maybe we both did." She hugged him, unexpected, impulsive, genuine. A simple embrace of shared humanity. As she turned to leave, Jack added one last thing. "Hey, Emily. When you get home, maybe find someone else whose suitcase is too heavy and give them a hand. That's how we carry them together." Her throat closed up. She nodded firmly, blinking fast. Then, with the photograph tucked safely in her purse and the handwritten quote clutched tightly in her hand, Emily boarded her plane with a quiet spark of hope rekindled. 2 years later. It was late December in San Francisco. A young woman in a tattered coat struggled to juggle a crying baby, a diaper bag, and a bus schedule in freezing rain. As her bag slipped and its contents scattered on the sidewalk, people hurried past. No one stopped. Except for one woman. "Here, let me help you," Emily Harper said gently, kneeling down and offering her hand with a steady, warm smile. In her purse, carefully folded between the pages of her planner, Jack's handwritten note still lived. The love had not disappeared. It had simply changed form. And so, the kindness went on.